has to be protected, and it's usually in a box, in a wooden box generally, which is called a Hebrew teak. And because there is this Jewish, the mitzvah, which is a positive commandment, it's to beautify holy objects. And therefore it is beautified with something which is maybe not exactly necessary, but which is very aesthetic and makes it pretty, and that these are the finials, which are usually of precious metal, and the crown. So that is not it doesn't have the importance of the Torah scroll, but it fulfills the law to beautify the Torah, which is so very precious. Finials are called in Hebrew rimonim, meaning pomegranates, because of their rounded shape, and they are the decorative metal attachments over the two wooden staves around which the Torah scroll is bound. In some North African countries, they were also called tapuchim, which means apples because of their shape. They were made in different styles in different areas all over the world. Yemenite finials, which were made in Yemen, not in Aden, to make the difference, which is pointed out all the time, and not the later Israeli Yemenite style, which changed again, are generally known as made of cast brass. We have here an example. You see the? No, you don't. Okay. No. Yes, here. Here you see the Torah case decorated by a textile with a mitpachat, which is like a scarf to protect. When you read the Torah, you protect the writing from your fingers, which may be dirty or sweaty. And you see the finials on top. That's a typical Yemenite, these are typical Yemenite objects. So they are of two verticals, it's usually of brass, not silver in Yemen. And cast brass consisting of two vertical halves soldered together, having three gently bulging protrusions of slightly different shapes with a gently ribbed surface. They recall the early types in the stylistic development of finials, being close in shape to the originally wooden terminals of the wooden staves, before metal decorative attachments were added. There existed in Yemen also more elaborate finials, besides this most common and known type of brass. Yes. Most of these known finials from North, There exist in Yemen also more elaborate finials besides this common type of brass. They were made of copper, but you see on the photo also of silver or even gilt silver, using various techniques in their decorations, such as filigree and granulation work. Most were decorated with designs of flat lozenges, discs, and 7-dot granule rosettes. Some had also, besides such geometric motifs, vegetal motifs of leaves and flowers, and occasionally even animal motifs like fish, while always keeping the same basic, gently fluted, elegant bulges. Most of these known finials come from northern and central Yemen, with the most elaborate types being made by the Jewish silversmiths in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. On finials we find occasionally inscriptions on the handle or another smooth part of the finials, such as on the exquisite pear with here, you see here in the middle, it's a pear which is a very exquisite pear made by one silversmith. And there are inscriptions on the smooth intermediate upper bow. It tells us that they were commissioned by Chaim ben Shalom Kisar, who died in Sana'a in 1918, and through oral information, because this is still rather close, we learned that they were made by the renowned silversmith Yehuda Giat, famous for his exquisite craftsmanship. Only in such rare cases the donor is mentioned and the artist is still remembered, so we have a date and their fabrication. We are not as lucky with the extraordinary crown with finials composition from Aden discussed here. This is it. Yes, it's amazing. They carry inscriptions of holy texts, but not of the silversmith, nor of the person who commissioned them. This leaves us without specific silversmith or date of fabrication. I must say that the Torah crown is also sometimes called, seen as the representation of the Shekhinah, which is the divine presence. And here it illustrates this idea very, very well. Examples of such crowns can be found mainly in the Aden Museum in Tel Aviv, about which we heard previously, and in the Israel Museum. They are made of different metals, mainly silver, but also gilt silver, not copper. Their decoration, however, is usually the same, made in incision and repoussé technique, mainly of geometric motifs, and in this case a special motif are the surrounding rows of arches with Hebrew letters inside each arch. Passages from the Bible's book of Exodus and from Psalms, along with excerpts from the prophecies of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Malachi, are inscribed at various locations, mainly on the cupola-shaped central part, but no dedicatory inscription. Here you are. You see the Hebrew script. This unique crown cum finials combination is a most unusual type, combining south and southeastern Yemenite stylistic elements seen in the finials, we shall come to it, and a foreign motif which is the crown motif itself. This attests to Aden's cosmopolitan identity, reflecting the geographical location of Aden as port city at the southern tip of Yemen on a trade route between India in the east and Africa in the west. And indeed, Indian as well as Ethiopian stylistic sources could be identified. They are estimated to have been made in the crowns are estimated to have been made in the second half of the 19th century, as they have been used in the old majestic great synagogue of Aden, we saw it before, called in Hebrew Magen Avraham, or in Arabic Al-Milam al-Kabira, which was built in 1858 on the ground of an earlier synagogue, which has been destroyed. Here we have a photograph of the interior of the synagogue, which shows us a synagogue not at all in the style used in Yemen, but more similar to Sephardi and Iraqi synagogues, a topic for another lecture. When I was in Aden in 1999, here we can see, here we see, by the way, this, I think the photo was from before, the President Yitzhak Ben Zvi, and we see how they look in the Echal. Yes, that's what I wanted to show you. I was in Aden 99. The synagogue still stood, not completely. I mean, quite in a ruin. But you can see, for instance, here on the photograph, you see the old synagogue. You see, and especially the gate is still kept, so you could recognize it. And you see on the photograph we took in Aden, you see how it's partly demolished, but definitely recognizable. We see that the gate is decorated by side columns, and here you have another photo inside the synagogue. No? Yes. Here you see inside the synagogue as it is today, and I mean, by the way, afterwards, short while afterwards, the whole structure was destroyed and a new building was put there. So you see the inside of the synagogue, and at the time when I was there were Somali refugees living there, very poor people. And you see me here 24 years ago, and surrounded by children, and Danny Goldschmidt was so nice. He asked me if he can put the photo on Facebook, and I said of course. And then it was amazing that a lady in London, who was then a child, she remembered me. She wrote, I remember. I mean, there were no tourists. I mean, it's definitely that, and children remember such things. Yes. So she remembered me being there. And that was somehow, a very nice thing to hear this. The early date of the creation of this type of Torah crown with finials makes it difficult to find the artist who made it and hear about his stylistic inspirations. It seems clear that the silversmith who made such intricate crowns must have worked in Aden, as this type is not found anywhere else. Now to the stylistic influences. When comparing the Torah finials of the Aden crown with finials from Jewish communities in southern and southeastern Yemen, places located closer to Aden than the types which we saw before, from central and northern Yemen, we see that their finials are quite similar to the ones from Aden. These types are generally less known by the public. They don't have the softly shaped bulges associated with Yemenite finials, but one major large spherical bulb and a second smaller one on top of it, which is crowned by a small onion-shaped knob. These fingers are variously decorated, mostly geometrical designs of lines, circles, rhombi, but also abstract leaf shapes. And here we have an example. I hope you see the finial. The first example comes from Haban, some 350 kilometers east of Aden, in the province of Shabwa, bordering Hadramaut, where an isolated Jewish community of mainly silversmiths lived. On this photograph of Habani immigrants arriving in Israel in 1949, one sees them holding an open Torah case with a scarf. You see here how the scarf is used, protecting the open Torah scroll, and on top, the upper part of a finial. The finial is very similar to the Adeni finials, having also only one large bulb made of two soldered halves, with chains hanging around their largest circumference, carrying pendants. On its top is another more elongated bulb with a knob. So you found it, yes, in the middle. Also similar to the Aden finials are finials from Rada, a town only some 180 kilometers north of Aden, where the bulbs are round and topped by an angled bulb with knob. They are decorated by incised circles with four-leaf design, and it is known that many Jews from Rada came to live in Aden. And it has an inscription. It is, by the way, a piece of the Israel Museum. Now the next one, you see here, oh my God. The finials from Sharab, a region near Taiz, only at a distance 130 kilometers north of Aden, can be seen on a photograph taken in the refugee camp Hashed in Aden. They are small, of round shape, with a knob on top. As I was told by Yemenite informants, the Adeni Jewish dialect comes closest to the one spoken in Sharab. Because of all these similarities to the Aden finials, one may suppose an origin in these southern Yemeni towns, which had Jewish communities. This is not surprising, as Jewish silversmiths used to go overland at far distances in order to sell their wares in other Jewish communities. Even from Haban, the farthest away location, they traveled for weeks and even months and returned usually back home only for the Jewish holidays. In Aden, however, we are, besides these finials, we have also the Torah crown, which doesn't exist anywhere else in Yemen. So we know Torah crowns from Europe, where they resemble usually royal crowns, as can be seen here on this example. You see, this is it's a Venetian from Venezia from 1856. And this resembles, of course, a royal crown. The Adeni crown has the form of a round cupola shape which rests on two large finials covered partly by the cupola. These are the finials topping the wooden staves around which the Torah scroll is bound. The cupola is topped by three smaller finials of medium size. Their function is purely decorative. All five finials, as well as the cupola shape, have chains attached as their circumference. The whole structure is intended to be placed on top of the Torah scroll. Here you have an example how it is. This is from Aden, but let's not go into that again. Either the silversmiths came from areas like Sharab, Rada, and Haban, traveling with their fingers to sell them in Aden, or maybe They even worked in Aden to produce them and added there the very unusual cupola-shaped crown not found anywhere else. This new motif may have been influenced or may have been even made by Hindu Banyans who settled according to the 18th century traveler Carsten Niebuhr in Aden already in the 16th century. And they were silversmiths. Their influence can be also felt in the Indian-style jewelry typical for Aden, often made in 22-karat gold, which was never the case in the rest of Yemen. Like here I brought you an example of a bracelet, and Danny has a similar one in silver from your mother, right? So this is in the Israel Museum. There was in India also a Yemenite community, as we know, which may have been influenced by local styles, brought them back to Aden. And now we are going to talk about the possible influences. Oh my, no. There is a remarkable similarity to the royal parasols. Here you see that on Vishnu Krishna from Rajasthan 1700. This is also a royal object because it's protecting the god Vishnu, and I'm hurrying up a little bit. And here you see another one, yes, on above the king. You see the similarity. And then there is also another influence. This umbrella shape reminds also church crowns, in a way also a type of parasol carried by Ethiopian priests on the Timkat processions. They could have been also a source of inspiration as there were vibrant economic connections between Aden and Ethiopia and Eritrea, and an Adeni community even settled there. So influence is very plausible. A typical feature in all aesthetic fields is the influence of the surrounding on traditions, which are often wrongly believed to stem from ancient times without undergoing any changes. There are indeed old traditions, having withstood time, but never entirely. An example is, for instance, a kind of necklace which was introduced, a completely new motif, was introduced at the beginning of the 20th century in Sana, the Labe Tuyur, with birds in, which was never done in Sana before. So aesthetics influence each other. Examples showing aesthetic influence from the surrounding are Yemenite Torah finials, so we spoke about it. Just to the finials themselves from Yemen, so are recalling minaret finials of Yemeni mosques, proving that architectural elements of the non-Jewish surrounding had often an influence on Jewish ceremonial objects, as was the case in other countries, for instance the shape of church towers on European finials, and minaret finials of Maghrebi mosques on local Moroccan finials. But besides these possible Indian and Ethiopian inspirations, there is an undoubtedly Jewish element in the elaborate inscriptions in Hebrew of the passages I mentioned before. The question comes up if the inscriptions were made by another hand than the rest of the crown. And according to Yemenite informants, and thank you very much to Dr. Uri Melamed who helped me in that, and I asked also other Yemenites, they are Sephardic style, they are not Yemenite style Hebrew. And another source of Jewish, another Jewish source, and this is the last example, I found in the remarkable similarity to the crown-shaped, you see here, to the crown-shaped motifs on an illuminated Yemenite manuscript, the tree of the 10 Sfirot, the 10 emanations of illuminations of God's infinite light in creation, on a page from the 17th century Kabbalistic Yemenite manuscript, a chariot of the Lord of Yitzhak ben Avram Wanne, made in the 17th century, but this was made in the 19th century. It shows amazing similarity to the Adeni crown, having also 3 elements on top of the crown and 2 elements below. The crown cupola shape is repeated a few times, with its full base on being very similar to the Torah crown. The Jews of Aden, which may have seen the birth of this special crown with 5 finials in the 19th century, looked like the Jews represented here on the next photo. We saw, you showed one, Dani, you showed one, the one on the left side, which is a photo made after 1877. It was made by the Italian traveler Renzo Manzoni. And the photo on the right side is supposedly made by César Thian, and it's in the Bibliothèque de Charleville-Mézières. Okay, this example of an exceptional, unique type of a ceremonial object is the Adeni crown, proves that new influences enter even the most traditional fields, what are often supposed to be traditions unchanged over centuries, if not millennia. This is proven wrong, and the influences of the surrounding visual culture, mixed with age-old traditions such as the Hebrew Bible texts, are found together. The artist who made this object proves this point in a wonderfully aesthetic way. Thank you very much.